I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The council's now in their workshop.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council colleagues, we've all been circulated 2808-23, and we're here today to discuss some of the updates. Particularly, there were several questions with regard to the number of licenses we hand out or approve, or letters of support we approve, but particularly the licenses that are ultimately granted for cannabis entities in town. We've received multiple questions and emails, I'm sure you've seen them as well, regarding other aspects of this ordinance. So I think the best way to go through it is just to take it section by section. If there is a request for a change, an amendment, an update, or a clarification, we can do it by section. We have scheduled 1 hour. If we go over 1 hour, if we go much over an hour, we're going to have to just agree to incorporate what we've done, what we've agreed upon in the meeting up to that point, and then we can schedule another workshop down the road should that need arise. But I do think, at least based on my understanding of where we are, that we should be able to get through most of the changes in about an hour or less. Any questions from any of my colleagues before we get started? Any comments, Mr. Moon, or before we get started?
No.
All right, so looking at 2808-23, we'll just start with the first section, which is purpose. Any questions, any comments or concerns on purpose? These are the changes. We've already made multiple changes to this. I'm fine with it myself. Seeing none. And for my colleagues that are off camera, please just raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment. Actually, if you want to just hop in, you can just unmute yourself, unless someone else is talking. Section 2, it's Chapter 5, Section 34.2, shall be and hereby is amended and supplemented to incorporate the following. It's got the definitions in there. Any questions on that? Excellent. Seeing and hearing none. Number 3, Chapter 5, Section 34.3 shall be and hereby is amended and supplemented to incorporate the following. 534.3, local license required, violations and penalties. It shall be unlawful for any individual or entity to distribute cannabis and cannabis products except for a licensed cannabis entity acting within the scope of a license issued by both the commission and within the scope of a local license in accord with this section. Any questions, any comments or concerns on 534.3? Lovely. 534.4, local license standards and limitations. A, the township may approve or deny an application for a local license to operate a licensed cannabis entity at its sole discretion, consistent with all governing state law, based on an evaluation of the benefits compared to the potential harm of the prospective licensee's operation of a licensed cannabis entity, as proposed in the prospective licensee's application for a local license. Prior to getting started, I asked Mr. Moon a question regarding that. And my question was, does this include renewal, the annual renewal? And are we allowed to deny a renewal application based on quality of life issues, such as excessive complaints, public safety issues, so on and so forth? And Mr. Moon's response to me was, we can. And we don't have to include any additional language to allow that in Section A, Mr. Moon?
Yeah, the renewal process, I believe, is in a later section, but basically 60 days before a licensee's license expires, they have to submit a renewal application.
But can that application be denied based on quality of life issues?
Yeah, the standard is what you read out in 34.4A, the benefits compared to the harm. So if you believe that in the renewal application, the harm includes, complaints or whatnot, that can be a factor. That's consistent with the analysis that's presented in that section.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. Any other questions or comments on A, 34.4A? Councilwoman Castellino?
Yes, thank you, Council President. This for Mr. Moon. So we'll address the renewal part of it. So I'm not sure if this has to be in the application or in the section of the ordinance, because we had a conversation of asking for updated stakeholder information such as the operating agreement. Where would that come into in regards to renewal?
So it's part of the same application process. The renewal forms application is not that much different than the initial application forms that you get when they first come to you. But I believe one of the changes that the council made back in August was that they are required to provide updates. That is.
Well, it should be, I understood it to be as when they renewed, they'd have to, whatever's current, whether hasn't been changed for that year, they would still have to provide it. That was their most current, whatever is their most current.
We're not there yet.
OA.
If you go on to section 34.6, one of the provisions that you guys added was section C. Any change in ownership subject to disclosure shall be subject to approval by the Township of County of West Orange by written notice to the licensed cannabis entity within 2 weeks.
Can we just hold on? I have some questions on that too. Can we hold off on 34.6?
Sure.
Until we get there, but I share some of your concerns, Councilwoman Castellino.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure, because sometimes they may expand, they may get a new partner, and that's great. I have no problem with that. I want everybody to be successful. My issue has and always will be, I want to know who every stakeholder is in the entity, because if we ever have an issue, we need to know who to hold accountable. That's all.
So it's my understanding, Councilwoman, that that information will be provided at renewal or the initial application. And then when there are changes, 34.6 deals with the timeframes they have to notify us of those changes.
So Councilman, all due respect, I don't want to depend on them when they have changes. Each renewal year, I want to see the most current. So if it changed, it did. If it didn't, I still want to see it. So whatever they consider their most concern. And Mr. Moon, however we have to articulate that in the language, I appreciate it.
It's the next section.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I think it's in there. So even now, when they
Well, it's in there that it's on them to tell us. If it's in the renewal process that they have to provide it yearly, it's not a big deal. It's just the same piece of paper. They just have to give it. Unless it changes, then they got to give us the new one. But if they have to provide it, they're going to do that. Things could slip through the cracks innocently, that people don't realize they have to provide that. It's not that's not a usual ask. That's why I wanted to make sure it's in there.
So, Mr. Moon, the way it is now at renewal, do the licensees have to disclose at renewal the ownership interests of every stakeholder down to the human individual?
So the short answer is yes. The very next section, 34.5. We'll get into it. I mean,
Thank you.
Unless you want to jump on it now, but
let's get through 34.4B.
Okay.
34.4B, the number of licensed cannabis entities holding a local license, there's a typo there, shall be limited to a combined total of 4, irrespective of the categories of licensed cannabis entities. This cap shall be inclusive of all local licenses issued to targeted micro businesses. This cap of 4 licensed cannabis entities with local licenses may be increased to allow pre-approved entities to move forward. So we are certainly going to deal with the number of licenses by category. We'd like to do that now. But before we actually do, I wanted to understand, what is the mechanism for, it says it may be increased to allow pre-approved entities. So when it says may, it doesn't mean shall. I'm trying to understand how that mechanism works to increase it. Is there some work that we have to do based on the pre-approved entities?
No, there's 6 pre-approved entities. We know who they are. As soon as we figure out what we're doing with those 6, quite honestly, all the stuff about pre-approved entities can be taken out. I mean, that's the reality of it. When ordinance was amended, there were 6 specific entities that have received resolutions of local support, 5 plus the one with the revocation with the chance to cure. So that's all that this is referring to. So there's no mechanism because we know what we're talking about. We define pre-approved entities as those 6. So yeah, if you ultimately, if you want to change the number, that is going to require another ordinance.
All right, the language was just a little confusing to me where it says it may be increased, which means it isn't, and it could be at some future time.
No, it means that you can, if for right now, the 6 entities, if any of them, because right now we have, I want to say 4 cannabis entities that have been granted state licenses, and there's 2 that are kind of still out there. If any of those 2 can come in, you can either grant them a license or not. I mean, that's really
okay. I understand what you're saying.
So, but it's only for those 6.
Right.
So any other applicants, we're
not even hearing. Right. All right. So let's discuss what we would like the number of licenses to be by category, and I think we should start with cultivation. I know that there's been some conversation in the council meetings regarding cultivation license, the number of licenses. Councilwoman Geber Michael?
Thank you. So I propose unlimited cultivation just because it's limited where it can go anyway. Or if not, at least 4 to mirror the 4 that we have now.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other commentary on the number of cannabis? Councilwoman Williams? Did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Councilman. So I would like for us to work in a different direction, if you don't mind. So are we comfortable with 4 dispensaries in West Orange? And the reason why I'm asking that question is because when we talked about dispensaries, cultivators, we were talking about a combined licenses of 4, irregardless of category. So I'd like for us to explore what we would be comfortable with the number of dispensaries, because if we don't really want 4 dispensaries, I know that's what we have said for licenses, but if we don't really want 4 dispensaries in West Orange, why don't we reevaluate and have that discussion as well, so that we're not talking about mirroring something that is ultimately what we don't want? So if we could just address how many dispensaries we would all be comfortable with, because again, this is a combo of dispensaries and cultivation with the 4.
Well, Councilwoman, I think we certainly will address the number of dispensaries. I think what we have now are 6 total, 4 that are by in the ordinance. We can have up to 4, but we have 6 because of the pre-approved entities. We're going to come to a mix of a total number of licenses. I just chose cultivation to start, but we're going to have to go through each category. So
right, but only thing I'm suggesting is, for instance, just like Councilwoman Geber Michael said, to mirror the 4 that we already have for dispensaries is what she was suggesting as either an unlimited or 4 to mirror. So before we mirror, how many dispensaries do we really want?
So her initial request was to have unlimited. And I understand that is her primary position. I think her fallback position is to have 4. And it's not, I don't know that her suggestion about mirroring the number of dispensaries is the right approach to it either. Mr. Moon, you wanted to weigh in?
All right. So a couple of things. So where we are currently, there are 4 retail entities that I believe have annual licenses from the state. West Orange Wellness, Pure Natural Vibes, Dogwood Green, and the Library of New Jersey. So if we were to do nothing, they're going to, and they proceed as they looks like they are. There will be 4 retail dispensaries that will be opening in the near future. There is Your Canna. They have They've received their state license. They were actually the first entity to receive a state license. They are coming in as a cultivation manufacturer. And then we have the one retail chemistry LLC that the resolution of local support was revoked, but they've been given a chance to cure, and Peace of Mind Construction, which was granted a resolution of local support by the council that applied as a cultivation manufacturer. So this is even assuming Peace of Mind and Chemistry don't come back or cure or figure out what they're doing. As of now, there are 4 retails and 1 cultivation manufacturing. It looks like they're going to be moving forward. The other thing is that we also have to keep in mind the way that the zoning under the ordinance works. So like cultivation is limited to industrial zones. Mm-hmm. So, you know, part of this idea of unlimited cultivation, while yes, under the licensing ordinance, the reality is the real estate market will automatically cap the number of potential locations. So the image of like unlimited cultivation is not, you know, just so that there's a fair picture of how that's being painted. I don't know if that addresses some of the points that were being raised, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Councilwoman Castellino?
Thank you. So I mean, no surprise what I'm going to share. So when we first did this, the whole intent was to pass more than we were actually looking at, because we were under the impression that the state wasn't going to issue all of these licenses, and lo and behold, they did. So there was a lot of time and thought and consideration to capping it out at 4. And even when I was on the task force, we were being very thoughtful to make sure that we had cultivation in there, manufacturing, and to save a space for them. So, we just went over, we have 4 and 2 are still outstanding. So, I mean, ideally, I would only, it's 5 altogether. Ideally, in a perfect world for me, even though I'm not a big proponent of it, I would have had one store, maybe 2 tops, and 1 cultivator to but that's not the hand I was given. So, we don't know what we don't know. We haven't opened up, one hasn't opened up in town, and to say that we're just going to do unlimited, I can't. I will kick and scream for that one, because I just think we need to open one up. I did not go to Lambertville, but I did talk to 2 people from Lambertville, and that site has an odor that you could smell, not all the time. But it also has lighting at night that people complain about a lot, because it has very bright lights. Obviously security, I'm not sure if they run 24/7. I didn't have time to research that. So again, we don't know what we don't know. So I would just like to open up what we have, keep the limits to where they're at. And then if if something happens there and they don't open, then we could have that conversation. But I really, really am going to highly recommend that we just stay put on the number, let these entities open, let them get started, and we could have this conversation in the near future. But to have it now without 1 store opening to see what we're facing, I think it's irresponsible in our report. So that's my feelings, Council President. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So just a couple of things there. One, I do think we have to still work on the rules of the road, so that those that are opening still can comply. And if we are to if we are to lift the moratorium and allow additional applicants at any point in time, we certainly want to make sure that the rules of the road are clearly communicated ahead of time. But with regard to the lighting, I think the lighting that you're referring to is outdoor, parking lot, and other grounds lighting. That's the lighting that comes from inside. You can't see. You can't even see it inside. At least in that particular facility, I think that is. I think that is probably the gold standard, and we would certainly encourage. I don't know if we can require, but encourage our cultivators to operate in a similar fashion, which would minimize light pollution. But I think that's also why we put it in the I zone, because it's less residential. But I understand your sentiment. You want to keep us at, essentially we have 5 right now, 4 dispensaries, 1 cultivator, and you don't want to increase any licenses in any categories. And on that's what we have on one end. On the other end, we have Councilwoman Geber Michael, who is willing to not put a cap on it because there's a natural cap, as Mr. Moon stated, based on the real estate. Councilwoman Scarpa, I just want to understand where you stand on that too, and then we'll have some more further back and forth.
I have to say, I am in complete agreement with Councilwoman Castellino. In fact, I had the same adjective to describe it: irresponsible. The residents that have worked so hard to make this situation palatable, that have been reaching out to me, are livid. They do not want West Orange to be the cannabis capital of Essex County. They don't want a complete infrastructure built in our town. This is in a residential, these cultivators are in a residential neighborhood near parks, bus stops, and homes. It would be completely irresponsible not to see how one was going to pan out before we would think about putting another cultivator. And I've done some research and heard some of the same stories about the smells and some of the problems. And this is a really close neighborhood. The one we visited in Lambertville was like practically on a farm. And if they're having those problems down there, I can't imagine what's going to be in the residential neighborhood of the children that I serve at Washington School. And I cannot vote for this. I think we've got more than enough.
Well, I don't, Mr. Moon or Mr. Abbott, do we have a cultivator near Washington School?
I don't believe so.
No, we have a dispensary that may go on Washington Street, but but not a cultivator. Yeah, the cultivator is located right off of Park Avenue.
82 Ashland.
But it's not far. I mean, it's in that neighborhood, near residential.
Councilman, there's a park right across the park on the corner where the dogs,
Lafayette
it's not a
Park.
dog park, Lafayette Park, yes, thank you. Lafayette Park is right there on the corner. So just being mindful and just bringing to our attention and awareness that industrial zone is surrounded by multifamily homes and apartment buildings. And so anyone walking past that area, which is why it was important to me that as the planning board kind of implements conditions, that they do something to address if there is ever a odor complaint and how that will be mitigated. And I think it's important, again, we as the legislative body identify the number and the criteria. But again, each of the departments that this has to go through as part of the application stage, can offer different recommendations and protocols to put in place. And certainly odor mitigation needs to be something that the planning board intentionally addresses if ever it becomes an issue.
So I completely agree, Councilwoman Williams. I do think we have to be mindful of the smell. But for those of us that went to Lambertville, what was your impression of the smell there for the cultivator? Because we are talking about a different type of neighborhood. I'm sorry, Mr. Abbott, I called on you. Did you want to offer something?
No, I'm fine. I was just echoing earlier that where you were describing off of Park Avenue on Ashland and the retailer on Washington Street. That was all I had.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir.
Do I have my hand up? I'm sorry if I do.
No, you unmuted. I wasn't sure if that was to weigh in.
No.
So what do you guys with regard to odor?
So I think I attended on a day when it was somewhat rainy and overcast. It was also a day that was before their pickup. And there was absolutely an odor outside. There was an odor when you passed the building. So that was my primary concern. And I even spoke to some of my colleagues when they went down to find out if they had any odor concerns as well. On the day that in question, they did not have an odor. They thought that based on what was communicated to me, that the operation was, run exceptionally well. But again, there are going to be times based on weather, based on what's going on with the entity, where odor is imminent. And because, again, it's a farm, a very, very, rural area, as opposed to a area where we're trying to retrofit a cultivator into a somewhat of a residential / industrial zone, with warehouses, it's a concern. It's absolutely a concern. So that's why I'm adamant that the planning board has to be able to have some conditions where if odor is ever complained about, how we would go about mitigating that concern.
So the chair of the planning board submitted some recommendations. I'm going to read those a little later on. We have 2 or 3 submissions that I'm going to include in the discussion today. But with regard to odor, when I visited the Lambertville spot, one of their units on the HVAC was down, not working properly. And as I approached the building, I was about 20 feet or so before I smelled anything. And the reason that was given to me for smelling anything on the outside was because that one unit was in fact down. I think they had a total of 5 or 6 units. I can't remember exactly. But one of the units that they had was down due to an electrical issue. So I thought that was outstanding. Now, I also recognize that not everybody's going to make that level of investment. I believe what they did was, above and beyond the call of duty. So I don't know if, Mr. Moon, is there something we can do let's come back to that, what we can do about odor mitigation or odor complaints? Because we're dealing with the number of licenses right now.
Right. I just, last comment, only comment on odor mitigation. If on the website, there's a form application for when they come in for a local license. And there's an entire section 7 of the application, which is captioned environmental impact plan. And it specifically requires the applicant to address a plan for odor mitigation.
Now, all right. So just to wrap that up, do we require certain kinds of equipment, even if it's not a specific brand or unit, but just types? For example, have no outside venting for the HVAC or things like that?
The bottom line is, the idea is they're supposed to have a plan for odor mitigation. And each council member can look at what they submit and to them if they don't feel that it's up to snuff. The problem is we don't have there's not anyone on staff that can look. They can name a bunch of machines and and look at it. And they'll be like, I don't know what this is or if it's good or what I mean. There's no odor mitigation expert within Chief Abbott's office or anywhere. So to the extent that there are specific things that you sort of come across and learn of that you think are important, you can basically make that known through, your review of the final applications and say, this is not sufficient, or I don't think this is going to work or whatnot. And, vote against it or vote for it.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. Councilwoman Castellino and then Councilwoman Williams.
Thank you, Council President. So, again, and you could probably relate this, what I'm going to say next, personally, because you live by the recycling center. So, before Ms. Zalino had lived there, my parents, I grew up there. And when they put the recycling center in, and through years, it's constant battle with the smell. And it isn't until recently, the past 10 years, that it finally got under control. But as you know now, there's still days where that may or may not smell. And so living with an annoying smell for any resident is, you know, has its good days, its bad days, and a lot of really horrible days. So I just want us to keep that in mind, that, you know, I feel for the investors. I understand everybody's frustrated because, you know, there's only so many sites in town. But at the end of the day, I mean, look at Lambertville. They put it out there on a farm for a reason. You know, we just because we don't have areas in the township that may or may not work doesn't mean like you have to put something there. And I think we have to be mindful of that. We had already approved one, and I think we, you know, we have to you know, honor that for now until we see otherwise. But at the end of the day, I think you have, you know, you just can't poo-poo, oh, the planning board, it smells and it gets taken care of, because I could tell you, it doesn't always get taken care of. The town, like, could go back pages and pages of documentation on the issues we've had with the recycling center. That's all. I just want everybody to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Williams?
I brought my hand down. Thank you, Council President.
So just wanted to ask you directly if you have a recommendation for the number of licenses for cultivators. We've got Councilwoman Castellino, who wants to keep it at 1. And we have Councilwoman Deborah Michael, who's willing to go, you know, far beyond that. Do you have and the other 2 council members, Castellino and Scarpa, want to keep it where it is now as well? Do you have a recommendation? Councilwoman Williams?
Councilwoman Castellino is shaking her head, so I'm gonna give her an opportunity to interject.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify. I want to keep at 4 total. So if you want 1, then you need to say you only want 3 retail. I want 4 total. I'm not going over that number. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
I want to let you know that I agree with Michelle, Councilwoman Castellino. I want to keep it at 4. I
Okay.
don't want to change the ordinance.
Councilwoman Williams?
So I am extremely conflicted. I never wanted to cap at 4. Even when we reduced down to the initial cap, I wanted to keep it at the number of entities. Now that we have been approached and addressed, you know, looking at where we are now, we have 5 dispensaries. I do not support 5 dispensaries in West Orange. So what I would
4 though. I think it's 4 dispensaries, 1 cultivator.
Well, we still, so again, that is depending on whether or not you rescind chemistry, because quite frankly, they have an unlimited letter of support. It doesn't have a timestamp on it. So based on the ordinance as it is written right now, they could come back to us at any given date and say, we want to open wherever, if they have a location, and we would not be able to deny them because they have an open-ended letter of support and a time to cure. So what I would like for us to lean more towards, and I'm not suggesting, because I do think it is important, again, extremely conflicted. I think that we should separate into entities, types of licenses. I don't think that we should have a just general cap on all licenses. So that's where I am.
And I agree with Councilwoman Williams. I think that we should figure out how many of each category we want.
So we start is, I can't see at the top if your hand is up, Councilwoman Castellino. Is it up? Please.
So again, my recommendation, just to clarify for everyone, is the 4 for now, to stay status quo for now. Let's get what we approved opened. And, you know, I may or may not be opposed if all goes well. But again, we don't know what we don't know. So I think we should just leave well enough alone, see where we go before we start getting into this, you know, changing anything. Because we don't know. It could go great, and we may, you know, it may be such an easier conversation next time. It may not go well. We don't know. To change things now I'm really uncomfortable with that.
Thank you,
That's it,
Councilman.
Council President.
So here's where I am on this, and I'm happy to hear your feedback. I think from a quality of life standpoint, I would much rather have cultivation and manufacturing than dispensaries rather, or the retail dispensaries. I think we have on one hand a commercial operation versus a retail. In the retail operation, we run the risk with dispensaries of folks, walking down the street or driving nearby and smoking or consuming, which could pose some quality of life issues. That is not an issue for us with regard to manufacturing or cultivation. So I am more for cultivation, even if we had to reduce the number of dispensaries. Obviously, everybody that's in the cycle that's already in the cycle now would be grandfathered in. But I do think over the long haul, cultivation does two things for us that dispensaries don't do. One, they have a different level of impact on the quality of life than a dispensary does. And two, they generate more tax revenue. And at the end of the day, what is in the back of my mind is how we're going to navigate through our budget and the positive impact some of these companies can have, some of the relief they can bring to residential property taxpayers in particular. So I would be willing to go to 2 or maybe 3 cultivation and manufacturing licenses in the category. Right now, we don't have anything stipulated for cultivation or manufacturing. We do have one that is currently before the planning board, expected to open this year. We have another that is dormant and not likely to come back, but again, they possibly could. And if we don't lift the moratorium, they would be able to, and they came back, they would be able to continue in the process if we don't revoke their letter first, which is something I think we already agreed that we need to address, is the 2 letters that are outstanding and dormant. But I think I would be willing to go to 2 or 3 for cultivation and manufacturing total. Now, if we did 2 cultivation, 1 manufacturing or 2 manufacturing, 1 cultivation, and I don't even know if we could do that because a lot of the cultivators are cultivation and manufacturing. So, Mr. Moon, could you weigh in on that, or should we do it as like cultivation and manufacturing as a group, or should we do it separately?
Well, the difference is an opinion thing, really. In my opinion, reading over the difference between cultivation and manufacturing, at least in my head, the differences are minimal. So I would say, we sort of treated them kind of together when we did the application process. So again, but it's up to you guys. I don't really have a strong opinion.
So my recommendation is that we would do cultivation and manufacturing as a group, and then the limit on that would be 3. Councilwoman Castellino has her hand up. Councilwoman Deborah Michael, followed by Councilwoman Williams.
Yes. So I'm just curious. Like, why wouldn't you wait for one to open to see if it smells or not? And if it doesn't smell, it's so easier to have this conversation. Obviously, they rake in more money. Obviously, that would be a better fit. That would be my preference as well. Again, but I like to make sure that the smell isn't going to be there. And then I recommend to support cultivation / manufacturing, like one and the same. So if you're going to 1 or 2, it's either or. To have like 2 manufacturing, 2 cultivators, now you have 4 entities. Again, I don't know why. I don't know why we can't just wait until we see what happens. I know there is one company out there, and I feel bad for them. We have 2 other, unless you do 2, if you're revoking, but we're having these discussions and we haven't discussed, are you revoking the 2 tonight?
We can get to that too. I mean, we've got to follow the
Well,
process.
I think you need to decide on that before you have these numbers discussions, because that plays into the number. In fairness to what Councilwoman Williams had stated, you know, there's two floating around out there, so that adds to your numbers. So I think you need to address that first. And
Well, we're not.
and again,
We're right
I
now
don't see the
on
harm
this-
in waiting.
On this part. I
But yeah,
understand, Councilwoman.
Yeah,
but-
but that's it. That's all I'm gonna say. Thanks.
All right. We had Councilwoman Deborah Michael, followed by Councilwoman Williams, and then Councilwoman Scarpa.
Thank you, Council President. So I propose 4 for the cultivation manufacturing category and 4 for dispensaries. And I will end my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Williams. You're muted, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Council President. The concern that I have is that all of us are calling out numbers and none of us have done anything on utility. So, you know, there is some pushback on whether or not we increase based on the fact that we don't even know what this business is going to create or manifest into because nothing is open yet. And so I understand that narrative and perspective as well. But the concern that I have is functional utility. We're saying increase to 4 cultivator and manufacturers, but do we even have the real estate for 4 to come here? And so before we declare and move up to that, that's why I think it's critical that we do an analysis to make sure that 4 can even come to West Orange, because we can get ourselves in, you know, a legal confrontation if we don't have 4 spaces. So, you know, all of these things are interconnected and we just don't have answers today to make the decision without having full knowledge of inventory.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So I don't think we would, and Mr. Moon can weigh in, open ourselves up to any legal challenges even if we had 4, if there's no inventory, because part of the application process requires you to find a space that meets all of the requirements within the ordinance, whether it's distance from a school, distance from a house of worship, or any of the other challenges that, you know, the zoning, where they're allowed. So there is a natural, based on what the work we've already done, a natural challenge to the number of places that people could locate these properties. So that I don't think is the issue. And I just want to say, while we have not opened any here, I think, and I don't know what research you guys have done, but I've looked at other states and other parts of this state where we have opened, where cannabis operations have opened, whether they be dispensaries or cultivation, manufacturing. And, you know, I mean, the expectation is that it would be similar experience to what we've seen in other parts of the country and other parts of the state. It's my understanding that in all of those spaces, when you have the rules of the road done in a way that doesn't saturate the market, you generally speaking have strong companies. In some places, California and others, where they've just allowed it everywhere, the market's been saturated and they've cannibalized sales and some properties have gone down. I think that's our job, and that's what we're actually working on now, is to make sure part of it is done by the zoning, but part of it is done by this discussion right now. How many is the maximum we would allow? If 4 is too many, that's fine. If 2 or 3 is not going to be supported by at least 3 of us, then that's fine. Then we're stuck at 1, and that's fine too. And I'm agnostic to this, right? I think, you know, my personal position is that cultivators and manufacturers as a group, meaning not 2 cultivators and 2 manufacturers, or 3 cultivators and 3 manufacturers, but 3 within that group would be sufficient for a town of 12 square miles, centrally located in Essex County, right off of 280. We are uniquely positioned and we have a certain characteristic that I think will make these kind of properties successful. So I'm fine with 2 or 3 as a category for cultivators and manufacturers. I'm fine with 3 dispensaries, but it's going to take 3 votes to get something done. And if we don't change it, which is fine, we're going to have to move on because we don't have much more time. If we can't get support to change it, then let's move on. Councilwoman Castellino, is your hand up?
Yes. Thank you, Council President. And I respect what you're saying. I've been, the more I look into this and talk to other towns and other places that have it, you know, I laugh. I said the worse this gets because I hear a lot of negatives than the positives about it. So that's why I guess I'm always cautious with this endeavor for us, because I don't want it to fall back on us. But let's go back to when we first opened up the application pool. And these are from my 2 newer colleagues that are on here. So let's go back. What happens? People go out. We say you open it up and you expand the pool. We're going to start getting hit with applications again. And those applications are going to have letters of intent. And we had issues with letters of intent last time where people didn't follow through. They didn't get their leases. We find out that other people come in. It's a very competitive market because we have such limited inventory. And now we create another situation, and that's how we got from 4 to 7, because all these letters of intent were out there. They're people that live in town, so they're voters. I don't want to change anything. I think we really need to let this be until these open up. I think it puts us in a situation where we get a lot of pressure from the public, especially if the investors are local, they live in town, they vote for us. I think we need to let it be until we see what happens, get them up and running, and then it's easier to sell to the public. If they're all working properly in town, people could see it, they're less nervous about it, and then you could increase the numbers. But to increase it now and not have one cultivator manufacturer open, I'm just so against that. Thank you, Council President.
Just want to correct the record. We have addressed the issue with letters of intent. That's already been changed. So in the current ordinance, you can't just have a letter of intent. You have to have a signed lease. It can be contingent upon getting your license, but it is not a letter of intent. And it has to be signed by the property owner. And I believe it was you that made that recommendation.
Yes.
And we did pass that. Here's my recommendation. I recommend that we have, because right now we have 2. We have to give a number if we're going to go by category. My recommendation is that we have 3 licenses for cultivation and manufacturing.
Wait, are you making a motion right now?
Well, I'm kind of just talking through it before I actually offer the motion.
Okay.
Yeah. So my recommendation is that we have 3, and I think behind that is the impact on the neighborhoods. I think there's a much smaller quality of life impact by cultivation and manufacturing than by dispensaries. I think there's less impact on our public safety professionals. So I would much rather have them in town than dispensaries, and I'm happy to give a little on the dispensary side if needed. But that would be my recommendation. And as soon as I hear from Councilwoman Scarpa, who had her hand up before I made that, I'm prepared to offer a motion unless someone else wants to offer one before me. Councilwoman Scarpa.
Yeah, a couple things. First, I'd like Mr. Moon to clarify, we have 4. We cannot limit the 4 that we've already given these letters of support to, who have invested all this money in their business and they have the licenses. I don't think we could go to any one of them and say, oh, well, now there's only 3.
That's why the pre-approved entity language is in there. So
that's right.
So it's not going to affect them.
Right. We have 4, no matter what we do. I think it's really important that all of us go out to the residents. I suggest we speak to all of them, because the ones that are coming to me are not happy, and they've said, don't put this in my neighborhood. They do not want cultivation all over their neighborhood. And I know they are weighing in. I've talked to a lot of them, and I'm sure we'll all be hearing from them. But
So, Councilwoman, so your position, because we are separating it by category now. We did not do that before. Your recommendation, I believe, is that we keep it at 2, because we have 2 cultivators.
No, we have 4. We're stuck.
We don't have 4. We don't have
5. We have 5 total
That's
entities.
Right. That's right. And so we're keeping it as it states now. And we have to accept the one cultivator that we have.
What is peace of mind?
Actually, no. Well, Council President, you're right. If you count the 2 that are floating out there, then it's total 7. But again, my understanding was there was sort of an interest to ultimately revoke those 2. Well, so, okay, big clarification. Chemistry's resolution of local support was revoked, but they have an opportunity to cure. So as of this moment, they do not have a resolution of local support. We did leave the door open. The council did leave the door open for them to come back once they found a new location. That has not happened yet. Peace of mind. They have a resolution of local support. However, we've been advised that they no longer have a lease with the property that they have proposed to. They have not come back and sort of with a new location or whatever. So those 2, I don't know how you want to count those, but yeah, one is a retail, one is a cultivator manufacturer.
So we're revoking those tonight?
So besides
if we can get to it.
Besides those 2, we have 4 retail and 1 cultivator manufacturer. So there's 5 right now that look like they're moving along through the process, and 5 that have a state license, so they are fully approved. So basically, the town is the last barrier for those, except for West Orange Wellness, which is they're going to be opening whatever. I don't know what their situation is, but they have a license now from the council as well. So there's 4 other ones that you'll be hearing from soon.
So we have 1 in a possible on cultivator manufacturer.
Right? Sounds like we playing spades.
So my recommendation is that I offer a motion that we have 3 maximum licenses for cultivation and manufacturing. Is there a second?
I second that. I'll compromise from 4. I second that. Unless, Tammy, you're willing to do 4? I mean, Councilwoman Williams?
She shook her head no.
Okay, then I second your motion, Council President.
Madam Clerk? You're muted.
Can we have a discussion, please, before we actually get to a vote? I know we've kind of done it in reverse order, but I do have some questions.
Sure.
All right, so we're talking about cultivation / manufacturing. Mm-hmm. Increasing the number of licenses for that particular category to 3 is the motion that's been moved and properly seconded. That means what to the fact that we have already approved 4? Mr. Moon, can you clarify what that is going to mean?
Okay. So right now, of the 7 that, or 6, again, it's so weird because I don't have to treat chemistry and peace of mind, but of the 5 that look like they're moving along, all right, that we're actively hearing from that have state licenses. 1 of them is a cultivator manufacturer. 4 of them are retail. So the reality is that whatever you guys do with the numbers, those 5 will not be affected, right? This is basically, do you want to open up for additional people? So even if you were to reduce the numbers,
it's still not going to be affected
because we have that language about pre-approved entities, which is specifically because we wanted to basically give them a full opportunity to do that. So the reality is that ultimately we're talking about where do we want to, if you want to open it up to additional licensees, how and where that's going to happen. That's basically what it comes down to.
I have a question.
Well, just 1 second, Councilwoman.
Okay.
And then if we were to, for example, lower the number of potential licensees in a category, retail is the only other category that we have them right now. So if we were to lower it from 4 to 3, the 4 that we currently have that are in the pipeline that are moving through the process would not be affected, but should one of them go out of business, we would not have the ability to replace them.
Okay, we're not, they're not broken up into categories. The decision was made to make them 4 irrespective of category, right? So,
well, we're doing that now.
Yeah,
we're breaking it up now.
So yeah, so if the council wants to specifically have categories of licenses and cap numbers at them, again, it's not because of the pre-approved license, pre-approved entities language, it won't affect the 5 people approaching right now. The question is sort of, okay, well, do we want, now, again, I don't want to speak for the council, but it sounds like there's definitely no interest in increasing the number of retail. But so it just seems like the single question is, do we want to have a number of manufacturing, open it up for manufacturing and cultivation? Again, that's what it sounds like. You guys can tell me I'm wrong. That's okay.
No,
And
you're
the
hearing right.
The other question I had, go ahead.
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
So the reason why I was kind of trying to slice this up a little bit, because I'm trying to understand that if we do increase the number of manufacturers and cultivators, then where could that number take us? If everybody opens up, then we would still potentially have 4 without the recension. So I know we're dealing with it separately, but if we were to, and if I can be so forward as to assume we're going to rescind the 2 that have not communicated and we don't know what their status is, then based on where we are right now, we could potentially still have 4 dispensaries and then 2 spaces for additional cultivators if we were to increase that number, cultivator manufacturing, to 3. My question then becomes, and what would that process look like? Would we, and I think all these things are important, because would we then open it up for a specific window? I know we've said people with licenses, but I'm just trying to understand, if we do it, can we say we're going to open up the process for 30 days and whoever submits? I mean, what would all of it look like? I think we need to talk through that as well.
So, Councilwoman, I think we have the ability to influence what the reopen would look like if we were to accept, whenever we were to lift the moratorium, how we wanted to put some rules of the road, so to speak, on that. If we wanted to do it, open it up for license holders in a particular category for a particular period of time, we could do that. If we wanted to open it up to anybody for a particular period of time, we could do that, and we can determine what that time period is. I just want to announce that Chief Abbott had to leave. He sent a note through the chat letting us know that he has another commitment. So that's why he's no longer on the Zoom. But yes, Councilwoman, I think we do need to deal with that also. And to your overall question, if we were to go to 3, for example, cultivation and manufacturing, and still revoke or rescind the 2 letters that we had out there, we would still have 7 total entities, right? Which we have now, essentially. We've already given out 7 letters of support. We would have a total of 7, but we would be clear that 4 of them would be dispensaries or retail operations, and 3 would be cultivation or manufacturing. And it wouldn't be 3 each. It would be a total of 3. So it could be 2 and 1 either way, or 3 cultivators or 3 manufacturers. But it could not be 3 of each. That would be the total in the category.
So if someone were a cultivator and a manufacturer, that would just be 1.
So that's what I was asking earlier. I would think that would be 2, because those are 2 separate licenses, right? There's a cultivation license and a manufacturing license. Is that not right, Mr. Moon?
No, it's basically you as an entity you're an entity, right? So if you're doing multiple things, you get the 1 license, but the review, the application process is going to be based on that.
So an entity could
I want to
have.
be clear. So the big thing is like the idea of I believe it's in the zoning section. I mean, it may not be in the license section, but like you don't have the whole wellness. I forget the term. I think it was a wellness thing where it's like integrated I think we prohibited that as part of the zoning aspect of it, but, so the reality is you're either gonna come in as a cultivator manufacturer, or you're gonna come in as a retailer. That's pretty much what the ordinance is kind of set up to do.
But all cultivators don't manufacture.
You're
And
right,
all
they don't.
manufacturers don't do cultivation.
But
I mean, they're,
right, you're right, you're technical right, but, that's one license, because they're an entity.
So we could
okay,
have
so
three
that is, so
entities.
that's, I'm sorry, Council President, I just want to clarify that. So you can have a combo license, manufacture and cultivation, or you can have a cultivation license, or you can have a manufacturing license. So if you were to come in and you did cultivation and manufacturing, to Council President's point, would we then say you're getting 2 licenses? Or would we say you're cultivating and manufacturing and we're gonna give you the 1 license?
Well, okay, so one, we can frame it however you guys want, but, if an entity is coming in, like your Canna, I believe they came in as a manufacturing and cultivation, so they got like one, oh, no, okay, they were just one, they were American, okay. So I'll take that back, but,
Yeah, they're cultivation, I believe.
They're
Only.
cultivation only.
okay, so if someone were to come in, I think maybe it was Peace of Mind that came in, and they came in as.
No, it's the
You're muted, Councilwoman. Yeah, it's blue violet, but we hear you.
Okay, yeah. So if you guys want to require a separate license, that's something you guys can do. But the way it is right now, the ordinance set up that like you as an entity need just to get a license from,
So-
the town.
So
So it
I
sounds
then,
like we
then I
need
have,
to, hold one second, Councilwoman. So it sounds like we need to, instead of talking about licenses, talk about entities in that category.
Well, that's what the ordinance is set up now, entities.
Right. So in that case, an entity, if we did three, you could back to Councilwoman Castellino's original point. If we did 3 entities, each one of those could be cultivation and manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, for you guys, then that's what you want to do.
Councilwoman Williams.
Tom interpreting it.
yeah, I guess that's how I'm interpreting it as well. My only concern is, again, just how do we want it to be? Do we want, is it either or for us? Are we comfortable with that? Because again, everybody who is a cultivator may not do manufacturing. That's a whole separate operation. So I just don't want us to get, I want us to be clear on what our intent is, so we don't have to come back and revisit this because we find out that somebody who is already cultivating wants to extend to the manufacturing. Because keeping in mind, in Lambertville, they have a cultivating license, but they are expanding to manufacturing. That's why they had all that equipment that they weren't utilizing yet when you first walked in, because they have their manufacturing license. It's just not set up, or either they're in the process of getting final approval for that. But I just don't want us to lock ourselves in, because again, if they want to expand that opportunity, and are we going to have to come back and have this conversation again?
Well, I have a question. When we were there, it's the same building, so that shouldn't count as a second license. I think if someone wants to open
Nope.
up a,
It's a separate license they had to apply for.
From the state.
From the state.
I'm fine with 3 entities. So let me clarify my motion then. I used the word license in my motion, and I should have used the word entity.
So you have to rescind the first motion, right?
No, we can strike and substitute. So if
Okay.
you'll agree to his change, we don't have to rescind, we can just insert.
So
course,
yeah,
I
I
agree
would
too.
rather the language entity than license. 3 entities.
Is that consistent with what the way the ordinance currently reads, Mr. Moon?
Yeah, the number of licensed cannabis entities holding a local license shall be limited to a combined total of 4. So it's the number of licensed cannabis entities.
So excuse me, Councilman, just to clarify your motion, is that based on your support to rescind the 2 ones that are open?
Absolutely. I am supportive. I said it before in the last council meeting that we discussed this. I think they've been dormant long enough. We've not heard anything back even after that council meeting, as far as I'm aware, from either one of those entities. So I am in support of rescinding both of those those letters. And if we can get to that today, I'd like
Well,
to.
I'm just saying, I just think everybody should state that, because even though you're not voting on that now, if you're voting, and no disrespect, I'm not gonna be supporting this, but if you, they should know whether there's gonna be those extra two or not.
Yeah. So that would be my position.
Okay.
And my
Councilwoman,
question also, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Councilwoman.
My question also, Mr. Moon, could you clarify, is the 2% from, to the municipality from both cultivation and manufacturing businesses, entities?
So the 2% tax is for all entities except for, wholesalers.
Consumption,
No, wholesalers.
except for wholesalers.
Yeah, wholesalers are the only one that, I think it's capped out at 1%. Every other category, it caps out at 2%.
I thought consumption licenses had nothing.
Well, first of all, consumption, but
We're not doing them.
yeah, they're prohibited under the ordinance, so you don't have to worry about that.
Councilwoman Geber Michael, are you still willing to second with the change from
Yes.
Okay. So the motion's been offered and seconded. Madam Clerk,
Council President, can you just go over the motion so I can write it
offer a
down?
motion to have a total of 3 entities in the cultivation and manufacturing category.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Castellino?
No.
Councilwoman Geber Michael?
You're muted.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Councilwoman Scarpa?
No.
Councilwoman Williams?
Yes.
Council President Rutherford?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries.
So here's what I need to understand. Breaking this up because it's 4 inclusive. So we want 4 entities or 3 entities for manufacturing or cultivation. Are we setting a cap on retail as well?
So I'm willing to, and I think that was the next thing. We do have to look at the number of licenses in the dispensary category. At this point, we would have to change the language from a total of 4 to a total of 7, unless we lower the number of dispensaries.
No, you can change the number to whatever you want, because again, the five licensees
Are
five,
fine.
whatever, aren't affected.
Okay. But the 5 aren't affected, right? But we in our ordinance, it still says a total of 4 with the exception of the pre-approved. So if we would not be able to, even with this change, open up to new applicants because we're already over our cap of 4 licensed entities.
Well, we're changing the number. That's what we're doing right now, right? So if you're changing the number, so whatever, that's what I'm asking. I don't know how that.
I have a question for Mr.
Can we
Moon.
not address anything with the dispensaries until something is open? Can we just?
Okay, so
So there's no moratorium going to be lifted on the dispensaries because we have letters of support and we want to see those open.
Yeah, I just need to know how the language is going to appear. I understand the moratorium's in place. I know that's going to be a discussion and whatnot, right? So right now you're saying you want to cap the number of manufacturing at 3. So, but that doesn't tell me what to do with the other. So right now, so the combined total of 4, that's going away. That's what we're doing here today. So we got 3 manufacturing cultivation. So that only leaves the question of, do we want a number for retail as well?
I have a question.
Councilman Castellino.
Okay, so I just want to wrap my head around it. So can we do it this way then? So we gave out 4 letters right now. The 2 will get rescinded. So we have 4 stores to open.
Retail, or retail.
Retail. If you're changing, so you're just adding 3, so that will give you a total of 7. However, you can state that, say 2 go out of business, or 2 don't get open, they're still grandfathered in, so you could say we want 2 retail and 3.
That is true. That is
That's
true.
what I'm
We could do
asking.
2 retail and 3, and not hurt those businesses. But yet, if one of them goes out of business, another one, doesn't get open, then we could cap the retail.
So real quick before I want Mr. Moon to answer that directly. I do believe you are right in what you're saying, Councilwoman Castellino. But in the interest of time, I would like to offer a separate motion that I think we have full agreement on, which is that at our next council meeting, we rescind the 2 letters of support we have for the 2 dormant entities out there. I offer that motion now.
I second that.
I do want to speak on this. My thought would be to at least provide them some type of notice that's happening. So if you know,
With
you want to
30
set
days.
a deadline,
Yeah,
30
with 30 day
days.
notice.
provide me any notice of that you have a new location. If you don't reply, we're going to proceed with adoption of the resolution.
I think Councilwoman Castellino Williams's amendment to adding a 30-day notice is acceptable to me. So that now becomes the motion.
So somebody needs to second the amendment.
Wait, say the amendment again.
I'll
please.
rescind it and we'll start over. I rescind
Okay.
my motion.
Okay.
I offer a motion that I rescinded the motion. New
And
motion.
I have to second your rescission because I seconded your motion. So
All right.
just so that we get everything correct.
Absolutely. So it's been properly motioned and seconded to rescind the original motion. Here's the new motion, that we rescind the letters of support for the 2 dormant entities that currently have letters of support and provide them 30 days notice, after which time it is automatically rescinded if there is no satisfactory movement. Go ahead, Mr. Moon.
My recommendation, just let's call them by name. Peace of Mind Construction and Chemistry.
Chemistry.
One technically doesn't have a resolution.
Okay. The 2 letters of support for Chemistry and Peace of Mind.
Second.
I just want to understand that, Councilman, so I'm okay with that. But Mr. Bill, my question is, so now what happens if one decides to cure within that 30-day period now, and one is, say, it's Peace of Mind? Say like, oh, wait a second, I got a store I'm opening up. Now you're going to have 4?
No, they would have
What you just did? You're going to have 4 cultivators?
No, Peace of Mind would still, we've got a cap on them. There would still be a total of 3 cultivation and manufacturing in that category.
No, they're not impacted by any changes because we've guaranteed them in.
They're
No,
within
I
the
know, but
pre-approved
now
resolution.
is that they're guaranteed in, but does that bring your total count up to 4?
No, it does not. I don't think it does. Mr.
No,
Moon.
it does.
So the other council members, the reality is, there's also a moratorium, right? When you lift the moratorium, you guys can say, we're only lifting it for 1 additional manufacturer, 1 additional retail. So, it doesn't mean that like every single spot is going to get filled. You guys are going to be the ones to make the decision. So,
So I heard this before respectfully in the very beginning of the process, and I got 7, we weren't gonna hear that everybody got approved, and everybody got approved. So I want this tight, so there's no misunderstanding.
So, Mr. Moon, if hypothetically speaking, Peace of Mind does cure, so the way that this would work to the original question is, we would rescind it, and in that rescission, they would have, it's going to be a formal communication from our legal department that'll say, hey, the council has voted this way. We're looking to rescind. You've got 30 days to cure. Right. If they come back within those 30 days and raise their hand and say, hey, we have a new location, we would still have to say, okay, we approve that location. We might say, we don't approve that location. Or we could say, hey, that location is good, but based on how you've conducted your business so far, we're not confident that you'll be able to execute on a project like that. I'm not confident voting for it. It may not even pass a vote even with a suitable location. It's still up to us to decide whether or not, when they come back, and Mr. Moon can correct me if I'm wrong, if we want to let them move forward based on what they're presenting us as the cure.
So the status of a pre-approved entity is that they have a resolution of support. So they don't count towards the cap. they're still subject to every other approval. So like, for example, they have to, if they have a new location, just like the Library of New Jersey, that's what they did. They lost their lease, they found another location, they came in, it was the consideration by the council, you adopted a resolution approving the new location so that they can proceed with their state application. It seems to me that chemistry and peace of mind are in that same situation. Right now, they don't have locations or haven't advised of their locations, so they're sort of out there. Ultimately, once they do find a location, they're gonna have to come, and they're not promised the approval. The property has to still meet all the requirements, that you guys have, as, zoning and whatnot, as well as just your basically preferences of whether the location is acceptable. So it's not an automatic approval.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. So the motion is on the floor. It's been did Councilwoman Williams, did you second that?
Wait, I have one more question about this. I'm sorry, Councilman.
It's okay.
So you want to give the other one 30 days, so 76 Ashland does not have a lease for that location. So why isn't that getting rescinded as of today? There's no lease there. Somebody else has a lease for that location. So when we rescinded the library, not them, but when somebody was in their spot on Park Avenue, that was immediate rescission. So I don't know why we don't do that for 76, because they don't have a lease there.
Which is 76?
No, they don't have a lease.
No, which entity is 76?
Peace of mind. That should be a flat out, no 30 days allowed, because they don't have a lease for that location.
So then why, so then they should be automatically revoked if they don't have a lease, because the letter of support is tied to a location.
Yes.
So if they no longer have a location, then the letter of support, so Mr. Moon,
I believe that, just as far as due process and all this goes, it's always better to provide some sort of notice and some sort of opportunity. Just at the end of the day, again, if you guys don't want me to do it, that's fine, but I highly recommend it.
okay, so then we want to take the recommendation of our legal counsel, because we want to be protected. And if that's what your recommendation is, I'm totally comfortable with that. Council President?
Sure.
So then
Councilwoman Michael?
I've already seconded the motion as it's stated with the 30-day notification. So it seems that Mr. Moon is suggesting that we proceed with the motion that you already put forward.
That is still on the floor. Councilwoman Michael, before we take the vote?
No, I was just agreeing with Mr. Moon, so I think it's important to give notice to protect ourselves legally.
Sure. So, Madam Clerk, can we call for the vote?
Yeah. Councilwoman Castellino,
Yes.
your vote is yes.
Yes, to rescind the two, yes.
Okay. Okay, with the 30-day notice. Councilwoman Geber Michael,
Yes.
Councilwoman Scarpa,
Yes.
Councilwoman Williams,
Yes.
Council President Rutherford.
Yes.
Okay. The motion
Thank you.
carries.
Council President, excuse me, I have to get off because we were only supposed to stay on to 6, and I have another commitment.
So I do too. I have a 7 o'clock as well. I know Councilwoman Michael has to go as well. That's why I wanted to get the thing that we agreed on done. I'm happy to adjourn the meeting now, and we'll entertain that, and we can pick it up down the road and address some of the other issues. But there is one issue that we have that's pressing before us, and if we can handle it quickly, I'd like to. The parking requirement, as you know, we have your CANA before the planning board now. One of the issues is the parking requirements for the cultivators, manufacturers. The current ordinance reads they have to have one for every 250 square feet of space. The overwhelming majority of their space is being used to grow. I think they've stated on the record they won't have more than 4 employees in the building at any one time. And we do have a letter from an adjacent property right next to your CANA that is willing to allow them to use their parking as a backup. So I think that would be fine. But I do think cultivation and manufacturing is different than the retail property. And I don't think they need the same number of parking spots. Can we move through that kind of quickly? Mr. Moon, I see your hand is up.
So basically when the ordinance are drafted, because it's an industrial use, I basically just said it's gotta be consistent with industrial use. Based on Mr. McPherson's letter, it seems like this specific incident is because they're a micro business and they're gonna have a smaller footprint than most industries. So, I mean, we can do some sort of exception for specifically for micro businesses that are manufacturing cultivation, to sort of lessen the standard, but I would suggest not wholesale changing the party.
I'm fine with that. Council, colleagues, Councilwoman Castellino, you have your hand up?
I'm fine
Yeah,
with
yes.
that too.
Yeah, I'm not fine, and I'm gonna tell you why. So first of all, we changed it already, to accommodate the cultivation to the 400 feet. So it's not retail, it's 400 square feet, which I know they would want more, but then they could go to, the planning board. They mentioned in the body of the letter, about office space, a lot of it will be used for office space, which actually, if you look at an ordinance for office space, it's 250 feet, so that's even requires more parking for office. So if they're gonna utilize a lot of it for office space. I think you need to let the planning board handle it, because if they have a letter, that gets handled at the planning board. So if we leave the ordinance intact, that's, we did add those spaces. The planning board could always allow that condition for them if they bring the letter and have somebody testify on their behalf. We did that with the apartments on Northfield Avenue, that they didn't have adequate parking there, but yet, the town, we committed to giving 10 spaces in the, municipal lot, and they got approved via the planning board. So there are mechanisms in place that he'll be able to get that accommodation. But, and then I'm a little confused too, because when we changed it to 400, there wasn't an issue with that at the time. So I don't understand why, that wasn't mentioned when we gave the original approval out, that, and I think it was, in fairness, that was mentioned, but that's why we addressed it the last time we changed the ordinance to accommodate that need. So that's where I'm a little confused. I don't have time to dig deep into this. I really gotta go. But
Can you just
I'm
give 2
gonna
more minutes? Just 2 more minutes?
I can't, I'm late. I gotta get in the car. I got something.
I would just like to say that I think this matter
Thank you,
is
Councilwoman Castellino.
serious consideration, and we should not be rushing this through. This is something we can take on at another time.
Yeah.
I don't understand all of the implications of this, and we should not be rushing something this serious.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman Scarpa. I offer a motion that we, consistent with, the language Mr. Moon just recommended to us, amend the parking requirement for micro cultivators.
I second
so
it.
They don't have
Sorry.
to comply with the 1 for every 250 square feet of
That's
space.
that's 1,000 square feet, Councilman. That's a big change. Our
I've
warehouse
not mentioned
number
anything on.
is
anything.
600.
So the
I
motion.
seconded it.
This
You
is
can vote
irresponsible.
against it if you'd like.
This is really irresponsible, I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman. You can vote against it if you'd like. Thank you. So my recommendation is that micro cultivators be exempted from the parking lot, the minimum space requirements for parking lots as contained in 34.8F. And I think that's the right space. You may correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Moon.
I would just like to know what the rush is. I don't understand this.
I seconded it.
Well, why is there a rush? I don't understand.
Because we have someone right now dealing with this issue before the planning board, and it could affect the timing of their application, which could affect them actually being able to keep their state license.
Well, then it's clearly a planning board issue.
So
All right, Mr. Moon?
it's more complicated than that. So there is 2 parking components under the ordinance. One is under the licensing requirement, which I believe only applies to retail, so put that aside. 2 is the conditional use conditions. Under the under zoning laws, you can't issue a variance for those conditions. Those conditions are mandatory because cannabis entities are conditional uses, right? So they all of them are going to require some sort of approval from the planning board or zoning board. So you don't have the wiggle room to basically get variances for those specific conditions because it's listed under as conditional uses.
So if we don't do it, then they'll have to comply, and if what they've been able to work out with their neighbors isn't satisfactory, then they would not be able to move forward in their application and get.
Okay, so if they work it out with the if they work out with their neighbors, that's a whole other thing. And they don't, the way you get that would comply with it. But the ultimate question is, do you guys want to do that? I mean, again,
Because now we're up for the numbers for everybody, and that's what I mean. You're gonna open a can of worms once again, as opposed to, and I get it, I'm a little confused because when we increased this the last time, I thought that accommodated the need of that particular investor.
I don't see the 400
we-
feet anywhere.
We were at 400 feet. We're at 400 feet this time.
The ordinance says 250.
No, our ordinance reads industrial, and industrial light for cultivating, we changed it to, which is 400 square feet, one per 400 square feet.
Did anyone think to maybe check in before we make this type of change to understand from our zoning official what some of the other uses are or requirements for any of our other zones? I think it's irresponsible of us as a council to make this type of broad stroke change without understanding what our codes are and the rationale behind our codes. I just don't think that we have the expertise and or the knowledge of our zoning ordinances to be able to make this type of blanket change at this time.
I agree.
It's not a blanket change. Excuse me, Councilwoman Scarpa. It's not a blanket change. So here, I'm comfortable with it because I'm on the planning board and I listened to these, the hearings. I participated in them when this particular applicant was before the planning board. My concern is not those. My concern is that could this be considered altering the ordinance for a particular individual entity? I don't know that I don't know that it would be called spot zoning, but I would certainly not want to be in a position of altering or accused of altering the ordinance for a particular entity if it had some legal implications. So I don't share the same concerns you guys have because I have sat in those meetings. The challenge is we do have for cultivators that are 2,500 square feet or less, their goal is to maximize the amount of square footage where they're growing. It is not a labor intensive operation. We saw that in Lambertville as well. Even with all of that square footage, they had like 4 guys in there, and that one was certainly much larger than the micro business that we're talking about having as a cultivator now, and any other micro cultivators that could apply down the road. So to require them to have 10 parking spots, which is my understanding, I don't see the 400 feet, Councilman Castellino. I see 250 and 34.8. I believe it is.
Let me find it.
34.
Aren't they
Mr. Moon, do you have
grandfathered
there,
in
did it?
anyway?
So here's the deal.
No.
As a micro business, they're capped at 10 employees, right? So
Yeah. They need 10 spaces.
right, but because of the dimensions of the property, I believe the issue was they would have to have 24 spaces for 10 employees. Now, keep in mind, this is a manufacturing cultivation, so it's not like they're going to have customers coming in and out. That's the reason why I think for the specifics of a micro business manufacturing cultivation, an exception might be appropriate because it's not like they're going to have a lot of need for parking when, one, they're not going to have like a lot of customers coming in and out, and two, they have a cap of the number of employees there. That's the rationale why it makes
They're
sense.
9,200 square feet, aren't they, Mr. Moon? Sorry to interrupt you, but I have to go, folks. It's 9,200 square feet, so there's not 10 spots? They get their 10 spots?
If it's
Anybody?
a maximum of 10 employees, they're not all there at the same time. They have multiple shifts.
No, but I'm saying the ordinance, the way, see, I have to go. So 400 square feet is what it says now because it's light industrial.
Where does it say that?
It
So,
says, I'm
So
having
the-
trouble
so-
switching my screen.
So the parking requirement for light industrial use is one
It's-
space for every 400 square foot.
Yes.
Right, but
Yes.
where does it say that that is the requirement for?
Well, they're light industrial.
Right. So retail has
Can't-
their own parking requirements, and then all other entities, which again, manufacturing and cultivation,
Yeah.
have to comply with light industrial and laboratory and research uses.
So I'm looking at, all right, so when you go in 24.2, conditional uses,
Yeah, can you read it, Councilman? Yeah.
licensed cannabis entities, licensed cannabis retailers, licensed medical cannabis dispensaries. Let me back up. Conditional uses. Specific requirements subject to the stipulations, guiding principles and conditions contained in this section. The planning board shall have the power to grant conditional uses authorized by the table of district regulations and specify districts as follows. 2, business and industrial districts.
Letter O.
Licensed cannabis entities, licensed cannabis retailers, and licensed medical cannabis dispensaries shall be permitted as conditional use in the B1, B2, and I districts. All other licensed cannabis entities shall be permitted as a conditional use in the I districts. These conditional uses shall be subject to the following conditions. 1, licensed cannabis entities shall be required to have a local license. 2, no licensed cannabis entity except a pre-approved entity at its originally approved location shall be located within 500 feet of the property line of any property with any school building. 3, no licensed cannabis entity except a pre-approved entity at its originally approved location shall be located within 500 feet from the property line of any property with a house of worship. 4, all licensed cannabis entities shall comply with the following parking requirements for non-residential uses. 1, licensed cannabis retailers shall comply with the minimum number of required parking spaces for retail stores and personal services stores or studios not separately listed. 2, all other licensed cannabis entities shall comply
There it is.
with the minimum required number of parking spaces for light industrial, laboratory, and research uses.
That's
So I put in
400.
here, what is it called? Okay.
That's 400. That's where you get the 400 number because that use is 400. Even warehouse under our code is 600 square feet. I mean, I'll compromise and go to 600, but I got to jump, folks. So I'm a no if you keep it the way it is. My compromise is I'll go up to 600 square feet for a warehouse because it sounds like he's going if he expands, so he's going in direction of a warehouse and our code. But you know what? Going back to Councilwoman Williams' comments, and she also sat on the planning board for a year and learned a lot. Again, like we didn't get a recommendation from the zoning, from our zoning officer about something like this. So I like to have that kind of conversation. I know what they're doing in other cities. I don't want to be a city. We're suburbs. Sorry. So the highest I would recommend is to do 600. You want to make a blanket for ordinance. If he wants to try to get it from the planning board, he has a letter. I don't think.
So Councilwoman, I'm happy to compromise and just make the adjustment to 600 for consistent with warehouses, if that's what we can do and get it done right now, because it's now 6:37 and all of us are going to be
Yeah,
late.
we're all going to be late.
How about this?
We're already late.
I'm not gonna.
Hold on, Councilwoman Williams, Mr. Moon.
I'll draft proposed language. I'll forward it to get it on for some sort of first reading. If you can look at the language as it is, and then formally vote on it as you're going to do it.
Well, in fairness, I want to hear Councilwoman Williams first.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Council President, may I?
Sure.
Thank you. I would like to hear from the zoning official as to the rationale. Again, none of us have the expertise, the experience, and the knowledge to understand why our code states what it states. So if you want to make the compromise, I'm not going to support it this evening until I have an opportunity for her to weigh in.
I completely agree, and I want to go on record saying this is incredibly irresponsible to ask.
Councilwoman, you're already on record, but you're also speaking out of turn. You haven't been acknowledged.
You said to jump in. So.
Yeah, so we've beaten the dead horse, and actually now I am going to be late too. So I wanted to get through some of what I thought was the lower hanging fruit. Clearly there is none. So I'm happy to rescind that motion and and then entertain a motion to close or to adjourn. And who?
I'll second
who
that.
seconded?
Yeah.
Councilwoman Deborah Michael, can you rescind that part of the motion, please?
Yeah, I rescind my second for the
Thank
motion.
you. Thanks.
All right,
Okay.
you can entertain a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a second to adjourn. I just want to do a point of order, and I know we've adjourned, but Madam Clerk,
Yeah.
can you just please work with our legal department and make sure the way we are rescinding motions is appropriate?
Okay. I'll speak to Mark tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.